Welcome back to Stories Across Borders. Here we discuss tales told across a range of different mediums. Our only rule is, as always, that we can only discuss things in terms of the story. Anything like special effects, animation, mechanics, etc. is off limits unless it pertains directly to the way the story is being told. My name is Daniel Radford, author, Sacrifice to the Ancient Ones, and also your host. And today I am joined once again by Blake Pingleton as we continue on through our cursed cycle on horror.
Hello, I'm Blake, chosen tortured soul of God himself.
In case you're wondering why we sound so done with this shit, that is because once again we are having to re-record an episode.
We're totally not bitter.
No, we're in high spirits. Thrilled to be doing this again, actually, because we just loved the first attempt so much that we wanted to try another one. And
Yeah,
I don't know what it is about this cycle in particular. The universe has just gone horror. Okay, all right,
you chose that guy for your podcast? The fuck this shit.
I'll show you horror. Now you'll know true fear. Wondering every moment if the next one is also going to die somehow between now and next week.
Speaking of true fear, what's our fear related subject for this episode?
Ah, what a wonderful segue.
Seamless as sandpaper.
Well, I was going to say as promised, but because we had to re-record the last episode as well, you never heard the promise.
Oh yeah.
But as we once promised, and you never heard, this episode we are going to be discussing Drew Goddard's horror comedy, The Cabin in the Woods. Yes, I did say horror comedy. As it turns out, you can put those things together.
Not often successful, but in this case, it works.
Yeah, it works surprisingly well, actually, given that they are two very different genres. And you see, normally when someone says horror comedy, what they really mean is it's a comedy with some violence set in a graveyard or something.
Or themes of horror, but not actual horror itself.
Yeah,
Think I can't remember what that one movie was called.
scary
Scary
movie.
movie. That was it. Yeah, yeah. I like how we both thought of the same movie.
Yeah, stuff like This Is the End, scary movie. Stuff that would be a horror movie if they incorporated any real. Although there is one genuinely disturbing scene in This Is the End. To be fair, it's those are comedy movies that are based on a horror concept, but they don't, for the most part, don't really include any horror aspects in the movies.
No, not really.
And we say movies as well because I actually can't think of any other mediums that have really done much horror slash comedy stuff. I guess Frankenfran, kind of.
I mean, if you have a twisted sense of humor, then anything's funny to you.
You have a good point. But yeah, to get us back on track, what we were saying, The Cabin in the Woods is a bit different because whilst comedy is definitely its primary goal, it does genuinely incorporate actual horror elements into its story.
And this movie has had a lot of big names in the horror industry. One of them being Sigourney Weaver, and they put everything they knew into this movie. Sure, there are a lot of tropes, and when it comes down to it, it's horror comedy, but it does that really well.
I mean, the thing is it's making very good use of those tropes because it is first and foremost a satire of slasher horror.
Yes, that's the key
And
words right there.
to be a good satire of something, you have to have a good understanding of the source material.
Absolutely.
Otherwise, you're going to completely miss your marks. The jokes aren't going to hit because you're not going to have a good enough grasp of what you're talking about to make fun of it effectively.
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely.
and you can tell watching The Cabin in the Woods that Drew Goddard and Joss Whedon, that asshole, who
Joss Whedon,
Yeah.
you're welcome.
You can tell that they have a genuine love of like those old sort of slasher horrors, like Friday the 13th and Nightmare on Elm Street and all that. Not only because of how well they incorporate the genuine horror side of it into the story, but because they know the genre well enough that they can satirize it and make fun of it, so that you, as someone who enjoys that genre yourself, can watch it and appreciate it for that humor.
Yeah, that's a perfect way to put it. That's exactly how I would describe it.
Yeah, it's done like what I appreciate about that though is it's not done in a way that only fans of the genre could enjoy it.
No, I mean, I think anyone can enjoy the movie. I think that's just how. I think that just speaks as to how involved the cast and the crew really put themselves in the movie. Uh, there were even some parts that just took so much effort, and a lot of the effects, at most, I mean, let me rephrase that. Most of the effects were handmade, right? Unless they just absolutely couldn't do it, in which case they did it with impressive computer generation.
We made
So
it
there
in
was a lot of sweat.
5 minutes,
What?
give
What
or
did I do?
take, before we broke our one rule.
Hey, we met our quota. We everybody gets one. Thank you, Spider Man. Anyway,
But
but
I
what
mean,
that's
it's
what I
what you
mean.
say is true though. Like that is evidence given to the fact that this movie was a labor of love made by people who genuinely care about and enjoy the genre that they were poking fun at. Because again, good satire, you do need that understanding, and you can tell that they had that understanding and that they loved it. And one of the things that does indicate how much love was poured into it was that they did spend hours upon hours handcrafting so much of in the way of the costumes, certainly for the various monsters and things that show up, and even the little bits of CG and stuff that they did need. They clearly put a lot of effort into it to making sure it blended very nicely with the practical effects.
Absolutely.
Um, on a more technical level, now that we've established that yes, this was made by people who knew what they were doing and had a love for the sort of slasher horror kind of subgenre, might be worth looking into what they did both to create horror and comedy on just a level of the writing and the storytelling tricks they used. So I think we should, I mean, first and foremost, the thing to acknowledge is that because they understand the genre, they were able to incorporate a lot of the known tropes of the genre and then manipulate and twist those tropes to their advantage.
Yeah, it didn't really feel like a very campy, you know, sort of riff on a horror movie that some movies do get.
I mean, it kind
It
of
was
did in
pretty
a lot of places, but only where they wanted it to.
exactly like they were able to play it straight despite it being comedy, if that makes sense.
Kind of. I mean, like we can like looking at the tropes they used, right? We
Hmm.
had like the characters all fell into typical horror character archetypes. We had the geeky dude, the jock. We had
The stoner.
the stoner, who is
We had
just the best.
the funniest tweaker I've ever seen. We had the whore, and that was what the movie labeled because
Yeah,
that was the name of the
that's just what
archetype.
the movie called it. And we had the sort of
The virgin.
yeah, the movie. That's what the movie called her anyway. She did
That is
say
what the
that's
movie
up for
called her.
debate.
I mean, you take what you can get.
Yeah, but
That was a
again,
quote.
the sort of nice girl character, I guess. The
Yeah.
straight laced one, more or less. And they, yeah, again, and they fall. All the characters fall very intentionally into those archetypes because they have to for the sort of sacrificial ritual that they're a part of. That we'll probably get into a bit more in detail in a minute. I imagine we'll probably run through the actual plot of the story a little bit.
You know, that's a great segue to get started about talking about the movie from the beginning. We're good at this.
Yeah, I mean, we'll very quickly get into why that is. I figure since did touch upon the tropes, might as well be worth mentioning that yeah, the character archetypes are very kind of camp trope exemplifiers, and they're this way on purpose.
Very true to what
Right
they
down to the
were
fact they're played by
satirizing.
actors in their 30s and 40s, and they're supposed to be in their late teens, early 20s. No, not 40s, not quite that old, but
I mean, look, some of those Hollywood actors look fucking immortal.
fucking Chris Hemsworth, who is in this movie. Yeah, but if we can take a bit of a step back and actually run through the plot of the movie just real quick so you can get a grasp of what we're talking about. Because the thing about these characters being such like strong examples of those character archetypes is that they are made that way by the movie's antagonists, who are sort of like a secret society, corporate kind of set up, weird organization who have arranged not just this one, but multiple scenarios for different people globally to be sacrifices to these like ancient elder old gods. You know, think like Lovecraft style.
And not only that, but sacrifice to these what you would see in normal horror movies. Now they're just draw the lot, figuratively and literally. At one point, you'll see this corporate society. Is that what we should call them? It's close enough.
We could just go with corporation, I guess.
Yeah, that's accurate enough. We get to a point, and I realize I'm jumping a bit here, but we get to a point where we see a fucking whiteboard listed with every monster that this corporation has at their disposal. And if you look closely enough, you'll see Angry Molestation Tree. And that was a reference to the Evil Dead movie, which is really funny.
Hey, there's one actually. The Evil Dead is a bit of a horror comedy kind of thing.
Yeah, that is also true.
That actually genuinely does both, I believe.
Yeah, it does it pretty well. I haven't seen it in a long time, but I know I was not disappointed by it. Although the tree scene did kind of weird me out, as I'm sure was probably intended.
Yeah, going by the name, yeah.
Yeah. But back to the movie we're actually talking about.
So these, college students, they sort of get together. They're planning to go on a bit of a trip during their break period. They decide to go out to the cabin in the woods.
uh,
They, sort of begin their drive over there. Very standard sort of affair. They meet a creepy old hillbilly.
Creepy old man in this gas station that seems like it just shouldn't be running, which, tropey as fuck.
Yeah, the kind of guy who you see at the beginning of the movie, and you're like, you're the bad guy. And he kind of is, because we see later that he's attached to this organization. And,
He
like,
takes the job very seriously.
yes, he takes his job extremely seriously. Like, at first you would think he's just playing the role for their whole setup that they have. But then you cut to a call he has with the organization. And he just actually talks like the doom is nigh kind of a dialogue, and the
Sheeps
people on
haven't heard to their fuck.
yeah, and the people on the corporate side sitting on the other end of the line spend the entire conversation just taking the piss out of this guy.
Fucking poor guy,
This is also where we see our first hint of the barrier, because as we get the sort of scenic sign of them driving beyond here now back into the sort of place where the cabin is, we get this really lovely scene of a bird flying above them. It's really well shot, and then I say well shot. I imagine the bird's probably CG.
It 100% was.
No kidding.
No animals were harmed in the making of this movie.
But it then slams into this invisible barrier and dies. And you're like, okay, that was weird. Because, you see, we've told you what the deal with this corporate group is, because we've jumped forward and back a little bit. At this point in the movie, this has not been explained at all why we keep cutting back and forth to this corporate organization. The phone call thing we just mentioned, it doesn't happen till a bit later. So at this point, we have no idea why we keep cutting back to like what seems to be like FedEx's corporate building or something.
Because we're building up to it.
And the movie just leaves you to wonder what the hell is going on. Why is there this weird sci-fi barrier thing here? This is not what I was expecting. Why do we keep cutting back to, Amazon HQ? Why?
It's pretty accurate. It's pretty accurate.
Just what the hell is going on? And they get to the sort of titular cabin. They start exploring it, and the cabin itself. Once you start getting to understand a little bit more about what's going on, is very clearly set up to encourage people into the roles they're supposed to go into, for one thing.
Mm-hmm.
There's a room with like a secret window behind a painting to see into someone else's room to encourage someone into the jock role and someone into the whore role and all that. There's all these scary memorabilia around the place and all that. And of course, there is the ominous dark basement that just magically, quotation marks, opens up for them. And they head down there, and it's full of references to other horror series.
And this is the point where the convergence point where Amazon and our protagonists get the relation, because whatever object they interact with is basically related to what sort of terrible monstrosity is going to rip them to pieces.
Yes, this is where we learn a bit about the existence of this prophecy about the old ones, and that the ancient ones, rather, they call them in this movie, and that it is vitally important that they choose their own manner of death here, basically. They have to make a choice that puts them in this situation. So to make that happen, the eviler Amazon, they published my book. I shouldn't say that.
Bruh. Cut that part out. Basically, they are
it's
unknowingly...
It's full of things like there's a broken mirror. There's these creepy dolls. There's
a conch shell.
There's like a pinhead mask. There's
a movie projector,
a music box, and an old like diary, basically, of the supposed original owners of this property, who were like crazy religious zealots sort of situation. And they do pick up and read the diary, thus sealing their fate and winning someone a bet. Because back at the corporate office, they were betting on which method of demise these people would choose for themselves.
The guy was really holding on for mermen, despite, a cabin in the middle of the fucking woods.
I mean, wasn't maybe the wisest bet, but I can understand that there probably would have been a great payout being the only one to choose it.
Yeah, it should be really hard to clean up afterwards. Those blowholes and all. That's a reference for if you've seen the movie.
So they end up with, what is it, like, murder hillbilly zombies or something like that? They call it?
Yeah, there was one guy was like, that's supposed to be zombies. And I'm like, no, it's hillbilly zombies. There's a difference.
Yeah. It's not the same as regular zombies. And you do see the regular zombies later in the movie. And
you absolutely do. They
do have kind of a different aesthetic.
Yeah, but they're still zombies.
But they're not hillbilly murder zombies.
Quit rigging the game. Anyway, so we get to this diary. They read it, and then shit slowly starts to go downhill for our protagonists, of course.
Yeah. We start getting our... Well, not quite, actually. I mean, it does. I was going to just jump ahead too far. So, naturally, filling the roles they are supposed to be filling, we have our, again, sort of the athlete, I believe they call him, in terms of their, like, prophecy and sacrificial requirements, and
Accurate.
the whore. their word, not ours, decide to sneak off into the forest to bone because it's a horror movie and it's a
Because where
slasher
else are you
horror
gonna
movie.
bone? Absolutely. I should also mention, they have not only the cabin laced with things that to alter their very behavior, they have the forest rigged to parts of the forest to release pheromones, to basically release aphrodisiac spray. So
Yeah,
it's
so
even funny. At one point, they could change the lighting of the fucking moonlight.
that's true. They do that. Yeah, so these in the cabin, the remaining three are just kind of being themselves and chilling whilst out in the forest. These two are getting just ramped up more and more and more, and
Mm-hmm.
then the zombies appear.
They appear by pretty much throwing a bear trap into a dude's spine and ripping him off of her. Oh,
And
and then
then
we just get
I,
right to the
they remove her hand too with the bear trap thing. I
yeah,
think it is the first thing to go. It's
yeah.
very sudden, very brutal, and I mean you know it's coming because it is a horror trope that is happening right now
Hmm.
as you see it. But
Yeah.
it's not funny.
It's not. It's pretty. I mean, it's pretty gruesome. I'm pretty sure like they had the guy watching with the bear trap like clamped onto him, while the other guy just sawed off her head
Something
with
like
a
that.
rusty
Yeah,
saw.
it was very violent, very sudden, and because everything up till this has been very naturally quite comedic for the most part, up
Hmm.
until the basement anyway, which was fairly creepy just because of its design.
Yeah,
Uh, it hits harder because you're like, oh shit, the horror part's real.
it is very real, and it just continues to be as such. But while this is happening, while they are trying to be smart about it, those crafty fuckers down in corporate, they're just as soon as one guy is like, we need to stick together, he just walks by a vent, fumes spray out, and they'd be like, wait, we need to split up.
Yeah, they he athlete guy with the whore well and truly dead. He despite his injury manages to make it back to the cabin and he's like and they start seeing the zombies and shit outside I think, and they're like
Yeah.
okay we have a problem yeah we need to stick together as we look for a way to deal with this and cut back to the corporate and they're like oh we can't have that no.
And then one guy's like, I got this.
Yeah, they press a button and they fill the room with like some sort of gas, and whatever their gas does, it immediately makes them go, "No, actually, that's a stupid idea. We should split up."
But if you'll notice, one character in particular doesn't seem affected by the behavior spray, and that is the tweaker. And
Yes,
there's a
that's
very
Stoner
funny
Boy.
reason as to why.
Yes, he has consumed so many brain altering chemicals in his life that at this point he is just immune.
He's just immune. He's God. He's the Shaggy of that universe.
He is Ultra Instinct Shaggy.
Uh,
But yeah, so we get a immediate trope subversion there because the characters do make the smart decision and are like, no, we're going to stay together. Because that's the thing, in these movies, the protagonists always fucking split up for no good reason and make
yeah.
themselves easier targets.
Hmm.
Because a lot of the like kills and things would be harder to pull off if people weren't separate because they can watch each other's backs. So the plot contrives reasons, at least sometimes when they're trying to make sense, they contrive reasons to split characters apart. Or they will just decide to split up for no good reason like idiots.
Pretty much just make bad decisions.
Yeah, pretty much. They immediately subvert this and then subvert the subversion by making them with a very contrived reason to fall into the back into those stupid horror trope roles that they need them to fill into because the plot not just at a meta level but the actual story needs them to be in those roles and do these things to make them easier to kill
Yeah.
because as we learn as all this is going on The other attempts to make these sacrifices happen aren't going great.
They're failing.
Because we see like a bunch of monitors in the corporate HQ building where they're like watching a bunch of these other ones. There's I can't remember them all. The one that there was something with like a skyscraper somewhere. I think.
I think it was. Well, I know one of them was Thailand. I'm pretty sure. Um,
Japan is the one I remember.
well, Japan was the one that they were pissed off because they always get the one ups on them. It's like finally show up Japan for a change. And what you see in the Japan monitor is basically this Sadako looking motherfucker
Yeah, you know the
haunting a
like
bunch of
the like
preschool kids.
yeah the very standard white dress, pale skin, long dark hair over the face kind of
Ringu.
ghost girl that appears in a lot of Japanese sort of horror.
Yeah.
She's like a lot like Samara or whatever the original one's name is from The Ring. She's a lot like the thing from The Grudge. She's a lot like Sadako from Corpse Party.
Mm-hmm. Great game. We're not going to talk about
That's a taste of what's coming in the future.
God help us. God help us. But anyway, but
Yeah.
getting right back to it,
Yeah.
while they're orchestrating this, these characters are running to their rooms because that's a great idea. And these corporates are like, all right. And they just are able to just close the doors behind them. So now they're trapped in their rooms this time.
Yeah. What was I going to say before we got to that? We tended a bit on the type of ghost. Yeah, they're failing because we see them like exercising the ghost girl and stuff like that through the power of song. And
The power of song and friendship.
Yeah.
And they were able to turn Sadako into a happy frog.
yeah, we see a couple of other things. I don't remember them specifically because I didn't have time to rewatch the movie a second time.
It's okay, me neither.
But they're not going well, and then we cut back to these guys where things are going okay for corporate and not great for the heroes. As Blake said, all the doors are remotely locked and they get trapped in their rooms. And then the zombies start breaking in. And the zombies start breaking in what I can only describe as the dumbest move made of someone's own accord in this movie. Because our stoner boy leans on the window.
Yeah.
The exterior window, not the weird perv window we talked about earlier.
Well, that was what's happening when he accidentally knocked over a lamp in his panic and noticed that there was a camera
That's right.
in the lamp.
Yes.
And
Before
he was
he
pulling
does
it out.
something very stupid, he accidentally does something very smart. Because he knocks over like a lamp or something and he finds the cords, the like wiring. And he starts going, And then for some fucking reason, after realizing that this is being orchestrated to at least to a summit level, leans on the window and gets yanked through it by a fucking zombie.
Look, when you have a moment of clarity, you kind of just take a moment to stand. You don't really know where you're standing, but you... But yes, he gets ripped out the window, dragged off into the forest, and presumably stabbed to death.
Or munched by a bear trap, yeah. Which, for the record, is the most impractical weapon I've ever seen.
Hey,
This crazy
there's
big
still a
zombie
pretty cool
just
weapon.
swinging around a bear trap on a chain. A+ for intended effect, an F for practicality.
Yeah, absolutely.
Nails the aesthetic, but the entire time I was watching, I was like, how does that even...
How does that work, and how do I get a patent for that? Anyway.
Even if it functions as intended, as a, like, whip range kind of thing, you still have to pull it back and then tear it open every time.
I mean, tearing it open, that was the intended effect.
Ha.
Whether it's ripping out some guy's spine or, ripping off someone's head with it,
Yeah, so at this point, we've lost Stoner, we've lost the whore. I can't remember what the Stoner was actually called in, like, the prophecies terms. Was it the Fool?
It was the Fool.
And
But it's funnier to say Stoner.
I mean, yeah. We at this point have cut back at the end of each of these deaths, and we see these like stone tablet things filling with blood, indicating, representing the person who's died, showing the ritual in progress. From there, the athletes, the virgin, and the scholar, that's what they call him, yes. They are able to sort of reconverge. They find a door, like another basement door in one of the bedrooms that they manage to all get into, and they descend into in their various means. I think the athlete guy actually comes in a different way, but they decide at that point, okay, we need to get the fuck out.
They try to go down to that same basement, but it turns out all the shit that was down there was just replaced by a typical hillbilly basement with the rusty chains and whatnot.
Oh yeah, no, this wasn't the same basement. You're right. This was like the torture room they talked about in the book, in the diary.
Yeah, it was just replaced by that.
Yeah, they get attacked by the zombies again whilst they're there, of course, but they manage to escape, get back into their like camper van, start driving toward the exit. Except the exit is blocked off by not only this barrier we talked about before. They don't know that's there. It's blocked off by this huge ravine. Basically, has appeared.
Well, not the ravine, because there was already a ravine there, but basically there's a tunnel that goes around the ravine, and the tunnel was blocked off by rubble.
Yes, right.
And what was happening during that time was, while they were driving to escape, corporate realized that the explosion to create the rubble hadn't happened, so these guys were panicking, trying to keep the kids from leaving, and were able to pull it off at the last minute. And our heroes were currently trapped.
Yeah.
And that's when the athlete tries to be a hero.
Yeah, he gets on a motorcycle. I don't remember where he got that from.
He got it out of his ass.
And he's like, okay, here's what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna try and jump this 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 reasonably large ravine on this motorcycle. I will get out. I will get help. In the meantime, you guys try and find another way out, or you try and survive, or whatever. He revs up. He drives across it. Accelerates to max speed. He makes it over the ravine, and then he slams into the barrier, crumples, plummets down the hole.
And the remaining two just see this guy just hit the wall repeatedly as it just goes down a really long fucking time. That's funny.
They decide to go back the other way. They get back in the camper van. They start desperately driving back the other direction. One of the zombies has gotten into the back of the van, comes out of nowhere and impales the scholar.
Yeah, just straight through the throat.
Which leads to like a standard chase scene through the forest. They catch the virgin, who seems to be the only one left. She's dragged into the lake, or she's dragged out of the lake. She's being set upon and beaten and battered. And then we cut back to corporate, who are celebrating their success, as that is the fifth one to suffer and die. And the suffering, for her at least, is important for the prophecy.
The suffering was the minimum. Death, it could happen.
Everyone else did need to die. So that's happening, like, sort of blurry in the background as we see the office party begin. People are, like, bringing out the beer and the spirits, the music's playing, there's people badly hitting on each other, a full office party in swing, they're all celebrating, and then this, like, hotline phone on the wall rings, because they get a message from upstairs. And the mood abruptly becomes very ominous in that building, in corporate. As we sort of hear something along the lines of, what do you mean? Which one? Cut back to the lake scene where Virgin Girl is being savaged by zombies. And out of nowhere appears the true fucking hero. The stoner appears and just clobbers this zombie over the head with his telescopic bong.
With this fucking, like, heavy weapon bong. Like, what the fuck? But no, he's still alive.
Yeah, caves this zombie's skull in, flees with the virgin, who is also still alive, takes her into what appears to be this, like, the grave that the zombies were buried in, where they emerged from. And he shows her that this is powered and is actually some kind of lift. And they decide they're going to go to see what the hell is going on. So, for the record, this is whilst there is just a puddle of zombie in the corner.
Yeah, what happened was when the guy was dragged off, it was actually him who grabbed the shear out of the zombie's hand and just cut him to pieces. Like there was just a head and an arm
Yeah.
and zombie guts.
To like twitching in the corner.
Yes.
They then get the lift working, they descend and find themselves within this facility, where they are immediately set upon by an armed guard, who they sort of just lock into the lift thing, and he gets got by what's left of that zombie. The hand like slowly creeps up to him and jumps in.
Just what you see is just the hand scuttling to his face, and that's when the door closes. But before that happens, while the two are riding the elevator down, they're in complete darkness. Not only does this elevator move down, it moves horizontally. And it stops at one point, and you see this werewolf just come out of fucking nowhere and tries to rush the glass.
But like full horror jump scare, basically. Because we get like one of them is like looking into the side of it or whatever, I can't remember. It's like, wow, you need to see this. Dude comes up to look, and that's when we get that sudden jump scare. I think from the other window.
There were two walls.
Yeah, because it's one on each side.
Yes, there was glass walls on two sides. The other two sides were just solid wall.
And we are treated to like this parade as this is moving down and horizontally through all these like glass cells of the different monsters that might have showed up to kill them. Which is when they have the realization that they chose how they were going to die.
Yeah. And that is the moment, probably the best moment in the movie is when they slowly pan out, right? And how you explained before, that these blocks of different horrors and monsters.
And again, just like to show the love that the writers had for the sort of slasher horror genre, or just horror genre in general. Almost every single one of those cells contains a reference to another horror movie or story or whatever. There's the standard zombies. There's the weird little ballerina girl with a mouth for a face, like this big circular pointy fanged mouth for a face. There's like the pinhead stand-in, the werewolf, the tree,
the angry molestation tree,
and just so many others. All of these things, just about, not all of them are necessarily references, or at least that I didn't necessarily catch them, but there was a lot of references.
I mean, every monster that's been used in that movie has been the focal point of a horror movie at some point. Ghosts, witches, clowns.
Yeah, clowns. Yeah, if not specifically a reference to another horror movie, it was a reference to just that creature in horror in general.
Yeah, absolutely.
Anyway, they get into the base, basically find themselves in like this control room. We cut back to corporate, who are realizing now that they are in the building and shit has gone sideways. They start sending the armed guards after them in droves, and Virgin and Stoner, they go, fuck this. And they press the button that opens the cells. And they let all the monsters out. And what follows is one of the most ultra-violent, brutal gore fests I have ever seen in any medium. As we watch every single one of those monsters do what they do, and do it well.
Yeah. To illustrate this moment, as they hear the rushing of the guards down the hall, they duck into the secretary's office, which is apparently not only unlocked, for one, apparently the windows are nearly resistant to damage.
It's not like a secretary's office.
It was pretty lavish. Like, it looked like a doctor's office, but just with a lot of elevators. But yeah, there was just a side door that they just ran in. They hunkered down. They pressed that button. The guards were running in, could hear every single one of those elevators were going off. They're like, oh shit. And then every single door opens and they're just ripped apart. Or in one guy's case, his soul was just completely ripped out of his body.
Yeah. To illustrate just how brutally violent this is, the hole was white.
It was.
By the end of it, it's red. That's not an overstatement. This white hole is like floor to ceiling, just covered in blood and viscera. It's quite disgusting.
It's very. It's kind of unsettling.
And I mean, it's another nod, right, to the fact that as the movie goes on, right, it starts shifting more and more away from spooky horror
Mhm.
and more into progressively more of an action oriented thing until it ends with violence and spectacle. And it's like what we talked about happens to franchises that done on purpose and in miniature. So the way the story is written, even at a meta level, it is a reference to how horror franchises tend to go,
Yeah, I was gonna say earlier on
which
that
is
this
kind of
movie
brilliant.
it is pretty brilliant. It really it's this movie is basically an evolution, like step by step of horror and how horror movies have changed, right? And just they just shift to the ultra violence,
Yeah,
and it's pretty brilliant in the way it's written.
yeah, it's both like a very meta sort of commentary on just how the horror franchises tend to go, but also of the gradual shift for what people wanted and expect from horror, because it does start out very much about this like weird creepy guy and the atmosphere. Then we change to zombie horror and jump scares, and then we get the spectacle and hyperviolence that you see in a lot of
Yeah,
more modern horror. Um,
yes.
I mean, not all modern horror. I'm not trying to like label things together. It's just that we did shift away a little bit, and it's because of the franchise thing.
No, no, I agree with you.
Yeah. Anyway, from there, the remaining heroes manage to make their way through the what is left of corporate. They find themselves in the ritual chamber with the stone tablets. Enter Sigourney Weaver from upstairs.
It was basically the CEO of this branch of Amazon. I mean, the society, and she basically
She
is
explains what's going
basically
on.
the yeah. She's basically that character.
Yeah, she comes in and she said sort of explains, no, you don't understand what is happening here. We have to do this and sacrifice. We're not trying to summon the ancient ones. We have to sacrifice you in this way to them to appease them so they don't emerge and consume the world. And makes a pretty convincing argument to the point that the Virgin does turn and pull the gun on the stoner.
Yeah, before anything can be done about that, werewolf just jumps behind her and just starts attacking her.
Yeah, and in the end they team up, they kill the werewolf, and then one of the regular zombies gets Sigourney Weaver and just tackles her off the edge of the platform into the hell pit below.
Yeah, and we're
And
pretty much winding down. This is basically the last moments before the ritual can be completed in any regard. The final subversion that we have to do this, kind of like in some horror movies where you got to do what you got to do. No, these guys just say fuck this and just let it happen.
yeah,
And
they basically go, if this is what we've been reduced to, maybe humanity doesn't deserve to continue existing. Fuck it, and they let the ancient ones, who are just these gigantic, vaguely humanoid things, just burst out of the ground and start wrecking shit all over the world.
the last thing you see is that in this chamber, a colossal, humongous hand just rips itself out of whatever abyss Sigourney Weaver and the werewolf and the zombie fell into, all the way up through corporate, through holding up the cabin as its forearm is out of the ground, and then just slams into the earth
Yeah.
and
We
cut to
never see the
credits.
entire thing. We just get a sense of its scale based off that one arm, and I love that.
It's great.
So yeah, that's the movie. We've managed to go through it more or less plot point by plot point throughout the whole thing, which to give you guys an understanding of it, because it's one of those movies that without doing that, it is difficult to talk about the things it does really well.
Yeah.
So we've established it does like what tropes it uses quite a bit, and I think it's worth acknowledging that what it does really like one of the ways it does things well as both a horror, a comedy, and a satire is it uses those tropes and it subverts your expectations. In the case of like the jump scares and things like that, it very rarely gives you an actual jump scare. It gives you like one really early on and one right at the end.
Yeah.
There's possibly one or two in there I'm missing.
Mm, I
And that
mean, if you count the one that the stoner was ripped out the window, but I wouldn't really count that
no, because I mean, it's not really much of a jump scare because
because you
there's
know
no
what's going to happen.
anticipation. Like there's no anticipation and payoff. It happens almost instantly. He leans in the window and he's gone.
Yeah.
And
So I
we've
would
talked about
probably
this
say it
before. A
was
jump
just the
scare to
two.
work needs the build up.
Yeah, it was really just the two.
Yeah, and I mean that's very clever writing, right? Because they have the first one, and you're like, oh shit, right, actual horror's happening, and then they don't give you another one at all right till the end of the movie. They give you setup. They set it up as though more are going to happen over and over and over again, and they never pay that off until the very end with the werewolf, and you get your second and final jump scare, and that is fantastic because by the time you get to that last jump scare, you're like, okay, there's not actually going to be one, and then there is, so it actually gets you.
Yeah, it's very well done. I mean, again, this was done by people who know the horror genre and know how to do it well, and they pace themselves really well with the movie.
Yeah, we get the subversion of the character tropes, right? Where we discover that this isn't really what these people usually like. They've been drugged beforehand through things like hair dye or food or whatever
Yeah,
before they even get there. When they get there, they're exposed to whatever that gas was. They're exposed to the forest pheromones. They're manipulated into various scenarios and things like that. So they find themselves molded into these roles. And we only know. I do feel like this is one of the things they could have done better because we only really know this because at one point the scholar character sort of says, you know, since when do we act like this? When is so and so like buy into this alpha male bullshit and all that? When
well, and the stoner was also like, "Why the fuck is? Why are you all acting like
no,
this?
actually,
Like, am I
no,
just fucking
it
crazy?"
might have been the stoner who was saying it actually, not the scholar guy.
It was the
Yeah,
stoner.
no, you're right, because he was kind of the voice of reason throughout the whole thing, which
Hmm.
is funny. Yeah, and that's that and the comment. Oh my god, I'm sorry if you can hear those crickets who have just decided to perform a full fucking symphony to really set the horror atmosphere. I'll do my best to edit it out. But yes, the head eye comment from corporate and the that comment from Stoner are the only indications we have that this isn't what these guys are always like. And I do think that kind of hurts the narrative a bit. It would have been better if we saw them becoming progressively uh, more caricatures that fit into those roles.
Well, I will say, in the beginning of the movie, the Virgin's friend came into her room whenever they were talking about getting ready, and the Virgin noticed that, again, the name of the archetype, not what I'm calling her, and I don't remember her name. So she actually just dyed her hair
The Horde did,
soon.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So, so it does. I mean,
Yeah,
you'll
I
hear it.
mean that's
You will
just
hear it later on. Like
that's
they'll be
just
talking
setting
about
up
hair
that
dyes and
comment.
whatnot.
You know,
Yeah,
that doesn't prove any like indicate anything. It just indicates she dyed her hair. We never see the version of her before the hair dye leaked chemicals into her scalp to change her.
that that is also true.
And I do think it's the one thing the movie kind of let itself down on, was that we never saw them slip into those roles more and more through the story, and I think that would have been fantastic for what they were doing.
Yeah, I'd agree with you. I'd kind of like to see a bit of a prequel where it's more sinister than anything else.
Yeah, I don't think you will, but it would be interesting
I mean, obviously
to
not.
sort of see how it all started out. Yeah, so there's the fake out jump scares. There's that. There's the fact that they just let the world end. Right, just the fact that they chose to end the world in and of itself is
Hmm.
a subversion of expectations. Because what you're expecting is that the two, once we get into the more action segment, what you're expecting is that our two remaining heroes, in some way, are going to save the world. They're going to end whatever problem is happening. And then you get the reveal that no, you guys, by saving yourselves, actually would doom everything.
Hmm.
Even even when the whore pulls the gun on the stoner and has that choice.
The Virgin.
Yeah, right, the virgin. The opposite. Uh, you are still expect. You honestly still expect her to pull the trigger at that point.
Yeah.
You think, okay, I see this. This is where the movie ends. She's going to realize that corporate were right, and she has to do this, and pull the trigger. And then she doesn't. The werewolf thing happens. The zombie girl tackles Sigourney Weaver off the edge of the platform, and they just let the world end. And that's kind of a double subversion, right? Because not only do they subvert the expectation of the heroes, no, the remaining heroes surviving and coming out okay and fixing things, but the very fact that they end the world means that there can't be a sequel.
Yeah.
And everything in this movie up to that point is set up in a way to let you believe that this is going to be a franchise.
Yeah.
There's all like
Yeah.
every scene where you see all the different things in the basement that could have killed them. When you see the monitors showing the different setups around the world in Thailand or Japan or I don't know, fucking New Zealand maybe somewhere. uh, all the different setups they've got, which admittedly, we saw them failing, but we saw them. When we see that amazing scene in the sort of multi-axis lift with all the different cells with the different monsters in it, all of that leads you to believe that this is being set up to be a franchise where we will see the other things that they were doing or the other methods of killing someone that they had in place, that there'll be a return to the cabin and someone will choose a different monster. Then we find out that that actually cannot happen.
Yeah.
Because if these two survive, the world ends and none of that matters. So that in itself is a subversion of expectations and it is like a subversion at meta level as well, because it's saying we are not going to become a franchise that just slips further and further out of what it's supposed to be as it goes on. And I think that is at a writing level very clever and a very smart decision.
Yeah. And I think, again, I like that movie a lot. Um, I think in the original take, when we did this, it was a long time since I watched the movie, so I did watch it just to refamiliarize myself. I will say, the super hyper violence, kind of put me off, honestly.
I
Uh,
mean,
but I
yeah,
mean, that did also carry itself into the meta commentary about the shift in the ultra violence in horror movies.
yeah, I can understand why it would have put you off, especially if you're someone who's sort of kind of squeamish about blood and gore and stuff like that. I don't think you are. I think you just prefer subtler kinds of horror, for memory.
Well, I don't mind horror and gore. I mean, I've watched the standard horror movies with the slashers, but like I discussed in a previous episode, if it's unnecessary violence and it's gruesome unnecessary violence, it's just off-putting to me.
Yeah,
And it doesn't disgust me.
it just bothers you
I
at the
mean, not
writing
to like a
level.
squeamish level, but it just doesn't leave a good taste in my mouth.
Yeah, see, I'm in a similar. I generally have a similar take where I'm not bothered at all by gore as a concept or whatever, but at a writing level, I don't like it when it's just used for spectacle and adds nothing to the story. But that's why I'm
Yeah,
okay with the fact that they did it here. Because it specifically is about that meta commentary, so even though it doesn't necessarily add to the immediate narrative, it does add to the viewing experience if you're thinking
yeah,
about it at that critical level.
right.
Either you get the exciting bloody action set piece, or if you have that understanding and knowledge and know the genre well enough, you can potentially pick out what they were doing there and go, ah. So I didn't have any problem with it.
Yeah, I mean, I thought about it later on, and I understood the violence because again, it has its own meta. You also saw a guy get impaled by a unicorn, so that was funny.
I'd forgotten about the unicorn.
That was really funny. I
Yeah.
kind of wish there was a sequel where it was just the
All
fucking
these nightmare
unicorn.
creatures, and then there's just this unicorn, and then the unicorn also subverts what you'd expect a unicorn to be just by immediately goring this guy.
I mean, to be fair, unicorns do attack people that aren't virgins.
Yeah, I do think in mythology there actually are a lot more violent than in modern interpretations typically make them.
Yeah.
But I did like that. But yeah, that's that. I think that that's it's fair to be off put by that, but I do understand why they did it, and I appreciate it. And
Yeah.
yeah, and because that's the thing is a good lead in. Like, I don't think it is necessary. I know we touched on this earlier at the beginning as well, but I don't think it's necessary to be a fan of the genre or like so crazy into the writing aspect or things like that that you are going to pick out all of these things. The movie does stand on its own as just a movie as well. Like, it's not just when I say it uses these tropes to its advantage, it's using them to its advantage in a way that it's not just amusing or funny or entertaining for the meta level commentary. It also does function very well as a story because again, it makes those rare jump scares hit harder. It makes things funnier because even if you're not like crazy into the genre and thing like that, you know the tropes, the big ones or the character archetypes and things like that. You know, like you're still gonna get a laugh out of the betting pool they have over how they'll choose to die, or over them refusing to split up and corporate having to take things into their own hands, and you'll still appreciate the really clever twist at the end where you find out that corporate aren't necessarily the bad guys. They're not
Necessarily.
they're not nice or good people, clearly, because they take pleasure in what they do. But
I
it is
mean,
a necessary thing to preserve the world's existence.
yeah. It was just kind of interesting because at one point, and I realize I'm drawing out this topic, but we see one of the two corporate guys who we see pretty much throughout the Amazon prospect, and we see this guy feeling a little bit sad and
Yeah, there
regretful
is one guy
as
there who's like, this is kind of fucked. Like, I get we've got to do it, but like, come on, guys.
and he's rooting for her, like he's rooting for the virgin as he's watching her getting beaten the fuck out of. But as he turns to his left, it's, tequila is my lady.
Yeah.
Because these guys are basically just office workers needing uh need a stress relief
Yeah,
and
and they're
having to
very
commit
detached
really
from it.
fucked. Yeah, absolutely.
And you gotta wonder, like, have they been chosen for this job because they're terrible people, or has the job made them terrible people?
Uh
It's never really clear.
yeah, yeah, that's a fun thought experiment.
Uh,
Food for thought, I suppose, but
but yeah, it's like it's things like that that make it function very well as a horror and a comedy simultaneously, and just they make and because of the way those tropes are used and the way it's written and the fact that it's still written very well, it works both just as a standalone movie that you can enjoy as a movie, and then it's just got the extra level as of the meta commentary on top of that, which is just another thing you can enjoy if that's the sort of thing you're into, or if you know enough about the genre to understand the satire. So it functions
yeah,
both as a regular, both as just a standalone movie that stands on its own weight, and as a satire of the genre.
Absolutely.
Like when I saw it was a horror comedy, I did not go into it with very high expectations.
Yeah, I remember in the first take of the first episode, I brought it up because I thought it was a great deconstruction of the horror genre while also playing it straight.
Well, I
And
distinctly remember a moment actually where you called it a psychological horror, which is why I messaged you and I was like, "What the fuck do you mean it's a horror comedy?"
look, a lot of things were being discussed at the time, and I got my words mixed up.
And you thought that, and did you think that we were going to re-record this and that the world wasn't going to know that you said that? No, I'm not letting
Yes,
you
because
get
it had
away with
nothing to
that.
do with. God damn it! That's a reference that no one will get. But I think we talked about this movie well enough.
Yeah, I think we have pretty much covered everything we needed to. Was this as good as the first attempt? Eh,
I thought I thought it was better.
well, yeah, it's much like the potential sequels to Cabin in the Woods. The audience will never know, and that they just get to have that play on their consciences forever.
Exactly.
Until then, we will, of course, be back with another specific example of horror media to discuss next week, where we will be talking about Corpse Party and establishing why some of my nostalgia was well, not really nostalgia, but why some of my memories of it being fantastic were right and some of them were wrong. Mostly right.
And I will be pleasantly surprised, and we both won't be bitter. Hopefully.
Yeah, hopefully we won't have to re-record that one. Until then, you can, if you are listening to this from Google Podcast or Spotify, you can find these episodes also on my website, radfordwrites.com, where I also share the transcripts for the stories I write that get read in the fourth episodes of these cycles. And every now and then I'll probably drop a little something extra in there. Also links to my YouTube and to my Twitter, which is Daniel Writes 7, where I occasionally do the tweeting thing about stuff. And you can also find Blake on Twitter.
You can find me on Twitter, slowly dying as it is, at RealMerkmeyer. You can also find me on Twitch at twitch.tv/Muckmeyer. That's M-U-K-Meyer. And you can find me on YouTube at youtube.com/Merkmeyer5945.
Don't forget to plug that anthology you're in.
What?
The story you got published, dude.
Oh, that's right. I had a story published. It's called Boned by, I forgot the name. I was not ready to plug that. Let me grab that. We can edit that. We can edit this.
I could. No, I will.
You're a fucking cock. Nate Regolia. Boned by Nate Regolia. You can find my story, Beyond Beloved.
Somewhere in there. Okay, well, we'll see you next time, folks. Thank you for tuning in once again.